The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, this is Claudia Johnson. Welcome to our monthly call of September 2018. The call is going to be recorded and we're going to post it on the resource page for LHI. So I will be posting that, and we always put the link in the front page. We are going to focus today on technical topics, and without more introduction than that, I'm going to turn it over to Mark Lauritsen and Bart Earl from Capstone Practice.
Thank you, Claudia. This is Mark, and we've got a number of slides and demonstrations today on this general topic of modularity and reuse. Let me just get my slides going. Some basic principles that I think are really important and useful for the developer community. The topics are basically how you can use some of these techniques and tools to avoid reinventing things. Stand on the shoulders of your colleagues and predecessors who built great stuff that you could reuse. And then in a related idea, modularize texts and scripts and other pieces inside your applications so they can be referenced once and written once and maintained once without having to be replicated in different forms. And so we'll talk about the insert and assemble commands, instructions in HotDocs, the use of repeats, a pretty basic idea, and various kinds of computations, regular computations and so-called parameterized computations that are among the tools that HotDocs offers for doing this kind of stuff. And we'll end up with some of the challenges when you try to reuse pieces across different template sets that may have heterogeneous naming systems and other kind of design features. So it's kind of a wide-ranging talk. We'll try to be as practical as possible. We'll save time for conversation, questions at the end, and Bart and I will take turns covering some of the topics. As I mentioned, reuse and modularity are really different ideas, but they're related. And kind of the two strands we're drawing upon, one is the idea of reusing stuff from other projects, where you're essentially copying material, and that could be from your own collection, your own personal lending library or component library, or collection of templates you've done. We want to grab a piece that's useful in a new project, or it could be from other people who've put stuff up in the developer portal on LawHelp Interactive. And we're mostly talking about HotDocs content here, but many of the same concepts do apply, of course, to A to J author guided interviews. So a lot of the ideas are overlapping. So that's one idea, is reusing stuff from other projects, your own or others. The other related idea is within a specific project, within an application, getting multiple uses out of single items. So having a sub-template that gets referenced in a couple different contexts, or having computations that appear in multiple places in different documents. And we'll describe how that works. And it can be either textual componentry, modules, or it could be logical components, scripts, that essentially represent different kinds of functionality that can be reused at multiple locations. But the common theme between these two different ideas is that of avoiding unproductive duplication. How do we, as engineers of these applications that are designed to help the world avoid duplicating effort when they're generating documents, how do we in our development work minimize unproductive duplication? So the benefits of doing some or all of this, I think, are pretty obvious once you start doing them. If you think a lot ahead and build your application to take advantage of them, it can reduce the amount of effort required to develop and maintain your projects. It can ensure reasonable consistency. If the same thing is used in different places, it's going to behave pretty much the same way in each place. And when you have projects that involve multiple people working on different aspects of an application, modularity can help in dividing labor appropriately. One quick example is repetition. Again, as a beginning developer, people often are not inclined to use the repetition functionality built into HotDocs, so they might be doing the kind of thing we have here on the right-hand side, where if you know you need to have more than one child identified in a matter, you create variables for every possible iteration. And we've seen, child 1 through child 10 or child 20 in some applications. And each one of these variables then has to be built, maintained, and if all of a sudden you decide to change a prompt, you have to go change it in every single place. It becomes pretty burdensome. As most of you know, there's a nice feature in HotDocs and relevant technologies, including HHA, where you can repeat things. And you can have an arbitrary number of iterations. So you create one set of variables with one set of properties, and you make them repeating, and HotDocs then takes care of ensuring that the proper values get put in the proper places with some user attention. So repeats is really a basic idea of reusability, just reusing components for multiple iterations. Well, let me turn it to Bart to talk more about computations, a whole other aspect of document automation work.
Okay, let me get presenter and
feel free to take over.
Yeah.
And folks, if you have any questions or comments while we're talking, stick them in the question pane. We will pay more attention to it after we run through these slides and demos.
Okay, so hopefully everyone is seeing Word with a template open.
I am.
Okay, so when it comes to computations, the basic simple computation, which most folks are familiar with, is very useful for reuse. And one of the ways that it's very useful is for logic and text that you need to reuse in various places. And this is the good old Montana divorce petition, which many people are familiar with from the online training we do. This is actually a finished, much more souped up version of it. But here's an example of using a computation to avoid having to repeat logic in a template. So if I double click on this dissolution parenting plan CO, open it up, you can see that there is logic in here that resolves to either dissolution or parenting plan depending on the user's answers to questions in the interview. So if this is a divorce situation, it shows up as dissolution, otherwise it shows up as parenting plan. And if you look at this template and some of the associated templates with it, that computation appears in multiple places throughout the document. So instead of redoing the logic in every situation, you can simply insert the computation. A much more powerful tool for reuse is a computation with parameters. And this actually lets you use a computation in much more varied settings. I'm going to open up this template here, which I created for demonstration purposes. And the template itself is not very exciting. But I'm going to go to the component manager and open up a computation that uses parameters. So when you create a computation with parameters in HotDocs, what you're doing basically is you're creating a computation that can be used in a variety of settings. It's not restricted to one setting. It takes parameters. In this instance, it takes two, which are a number, which is a text string, and a format. And then it does some manipulation of those values based on the text of or the script of the computation. And this particular instance, this computation, you could see is somewhat complex. It's designed to handle telephone numbers where the user can enter it in any number of different formats, and you want to be able to output it to a document in specified formats. So it basically allows you to transform a bunch of numbers into something that, for example, if you have to put each element of the phone number in a single little field in a PDF template, this allows you to do it because it basically can strip out all of the formatting that the user put in. And if you let's say you have an interview or a template where you have 5 different or 10 different telephone numbers that you're asking the user to input, you could create a computation that handles each of those telephone numbers. And instead of using parameters, you could have it process particular variables, the particular telephone number variables, you know, the petitioner's telephone number, the child's telephone number, whatever the case may be. The parameterized computation lets you create one complicated script and then feed a particular value into it. So if I go out to the main template, I'll just do a test run of this. So this is asking for a phone number. So I can do, you know, 99, well, let me put in a number that could be a number. So I'll put in 888-222-4545. Actually, let me put it in with a, and then I just have to resize this so I can actually get to the navigation buttons. So I'm sending this. So what happens here? So this actually has taken the telephone number that I entered. Well, didn't work, interestingly enough. I'm not sure what I did wrong. But the idea here is that you can use this particular type of computation in a variety of settings, and it's quite a powerful tool. I guess back to you, Mark, for the next.
Hey, Bart, someone's asking a question. Andrea is asking, has someone developed one of these for Social Security numbers? And I guess the answer is probably, but we don't know. But we use the same principles, right?
Yeah, it would use the same principles, and you could actually, this particular computation, if you go to the HotDocs, if you're a member of the HotDocs forum, which is always a good idea, if you go to the script sharing, this particular one is in the script sharing portion of the HotDocs forum, and you could pretty easily adapt this to use for Social Security numbers, because it uses the actual computation itself actually tries to find either 7 or 9 characters and format it. Social Security number is 10 characters, I think, and so you could just adapt it so it looks for 10 characters, and you'd have to make other changes because this computation actually looks for valid telephone numbers. So, for example, it doesn't let you put in, it strips out an initial 1, for example, in the telephone number, and things like that. So, but it is pretty easily adaptable. And maybe somebody has already done something
Bart,
like this.
Can you describe what the HotDocs forum is?
Yeah, the HotDocs forum is on the at hotdocs.com on the publisher's site, and the forum basically is a forum where you can ask questions of other folks that are using HotDocs, and a lot of people who have a great deal of expertise in HotDocs typically answer questions there. So it's a good place to go in general to get help, but there are 3 different sections of the forum. One of them is the general section where you can ask general questions. One of them is there's a server section where you can ask questions specifically about server. There's a section for the HotDocs API, application programming interface, where you can ask questions about that. And then there's the script sharing forum. And the script sharing forum really is just a place to share scripts. And the general forum is the one that gets the most use. The other 2 are, probably of not a great deal of interest. And even the server forum, there's so few people actually using server that if you have questions specifically about server, using the list, the developer list, is a much better place to go.
Cool. And so it's like a granddaddy companion to the document assembly list that a lot of you are on, which is limited to the legal services community. The HotDocs forum is an international conversation among users of HotDocs. I think it's got about 5,000 members. But it's reasonably low traffic, high quality. So if you're a serious HotDocs developer, you'll find it a place you want to set up for. Okay, let me take it back for a second, Bart, and continue. So we've talked about computations. This is in these slides, which will be in the folder for this call on the Resource Center right after we get done. But this has the actual script for Bart's parameterized example that shows how it's using 2 parameters and then some local variables in here. And once you understand the basic syntax, it usually works quite nicely. Okay, next topic, inserts and assembles. Bart, maybe you could also at least just talk to this conceptually while I leave this slide up.
Sure. There are many situations where you want to use a template essentially within a template. And the 2 ways that you can do that are using inserts or assembles. Inserts allow you to create one document. It can be a Word document or a PDF document that uses other templates as building blocks, and then you end up with one document, one physical document that contains multiple, either multiple chunks of text or multiple virtual documents, so that you can assemble. Let's say you need to assemble a complaint and a summons, and some other documents associated with the complaint. You can create one document that has all of those virtual documents in it that the user can download from LHI. Assemble is a similar functionality, but it works, allows you to assemble multiple separate physical documents. So again, Word or PDF. On LHI, we use the terminology multiple document or multiple documents, and then the user basically, when they hit Get Document, they get a list of their documents that they can download separately. And either way, you can modularize in the sense that you can insert some documents into, you can insert one template into multiple templates. So if you need to reuse it, let's say you have 5 different kinds of complaints, for example, and you want to use the same summons with each of those 5 different kinds of complaints, rather than rebuilding the summons 5 times, you can insert the same summons template in 5 different complaint templates and reuse it in that way. Assembles, you can do it similarly. If you wanted to assemble the summons as a separate document, you could do the same thing. You could basically put an assemble command in your complaint and have it assemble the template. And I can show a couple of examples if we want to do that. Okay, so here's an example of using insert, and this is a pretty simple example. I'll open this up for editing. This has a bunch of instruction, a bunch of inserts at the beginning that insert different types of instructions for the user based on what type of form they're generating. I'm going to go down to the end. This is a really simple example of reuse here. So this particular form is this particular template is an appeal, and the users can, when they file the appeal, they can prepare their informer pauperous motion, their motion to get the cost waived. They can either prepare it as part of this main interview, or if they want to come back later and do it separately, there's a separate interview for the IFP motion. So the IFP motion is used in 2 different places. It's used as its own standalone interview and it's used as an insert to this particular template when the user chooses to do it as part of this template. And that's a really simple example of reuse using insert. There's an example of assemble in a PDF in this interview. I will open this interview for editing. Go to the interview. And this interview, this document here, placeholder HPT, this template basically is a document that says, you didn't answer all the questions that you needed to, or the information that you supplied means that you can't use this particular interview or this particular template. And it assembles based on logic in the interview that determines whether the user is in the wrong place, it assembles this placeholder document. If they do qualify to use this form, then it assembles the actual template itself. And the placeholder document can be used in multiple templates, basically. It's a generic template. And we want to use assemble here because we actually don't want the user to get the main document at all if they don't qualify to use it. And those are a couple of examples of using assemble and insert. And I don't know if Mark, if you're muted.
I was muted. Thank you very much for reminding me. I was just going back here to the slides and saying one common scenario that wasn't actually mentioned is just using captions and using inserts for captions and signature blocks, where you're inserting a chunk of text right in the middle in the stream of a Word document. In a PDF template, you can only insert things sequentially as entire forms. So when you have an insert field inside of a PDF template and the conditions for the insert are met, it'll just add that new PDF to the end of the first. Obviously, you can't insert RTF stuff into PDF or PDF stuff into RTF. However, you can assemble sets of documents that are mixed. So you can create applications on LHI that actually emit combinations of RTF and PDF or DocX outputs, which is quite powerful. There's a link on the slide to a whole webinar we did on the inserting, assembling multiple documents frontier. That's here, so I would encourage you to look at that if you want to learn more. One little fancy move I was going to mention here is that sometimes, this recently came up, you want to, in the same template, you want to let the user decide whether they want to have things assembled or inserted. This is a unlawful detainer application in Los Angeles. And it turns out if you're going to be e-filing the results of your interview, you have to create separate files. And so things need to be assembled. On the other hand, if you're going to be just using it for your own purposes and would prefer to have a single concatenated document with all the forms in it in one file for easier management, you can say, no, I don't plan to e-file, and then it'll fire these inserts. And it's controlled by this variable here if the user plans to e-file. So just a concept in case you run into this. I think we've seen some of this in Texas and elsewhere, but it's just combining the notion of inserts and assembles with the conditionalization. Mention quickly, when it comes to finding stuff to copy, I hope everybody knows about the developer portal. If you have a developer account, you can not only get access to your content that you've uploaded and everybody else in your jurisdiction, but you can get the entire software commons of LawHelp Interactive and search and find things that are relevant that you can download in their entirety, copy as needed, talk to the developer, and avoid unnecessarily recreating things that might be reusable. The URL, Andrea is asking, yeah, let me put that in the chat. I think you're asking for the URL on the prior page, if I'm not mistaken. On this right here. I don't know if I can copy it here or not. Yeah, I can't copy it in this mode, but I will. Oh, here it is. Oh. Let me go to it. Maybe that's the way to do it. Take a moment. And I'll stick it in the chat. It's requiring me to log in, which I will take a moment to do, even though I was logged in a minute ago. Okay, it's this guy right here. Long way of getting that. Stick it in the chat. I think that will make it available to everybody. Once I do one more thing, entire audience. Okay, so that's in the chat. Back to my slides. The developer portal, of course, is available to anybody who is logged in as a contributor. I was going to take time just to show some of this, but maybe we'll save that for the questions if there are any. But right now on LHI, it's using what's called the Kendo grid, which is a pretty sophisticated set of functionality for these kinds of tables. And you can click, you can sort things by type, status, title, who created them, etc. More importantly, you can search, so you can find all the templates that deal with bankruptcy or divorce or parenting plan or child support, whatever it may be, and limit the listing and then drill down to specific templates. And it's quite powerful, reasonably intuitive. Click on these little three dots to do that. I'm going to mention a few other things and then we can break for questions more generally. One thing we did almost 10 years ago now was put together a compilation of reusable content in a particular practice area, namely family law. So there was a grant awarded to Legal Assistance of Western New York. They funded a company Bart and I were involved with called Legal Systematics to distill know-how from about a dozen family law projects using HotDocs and related tools and put them into a HotDocs library of reusable content that's made freely available to LSE grantees. So this kit has got maybe 500, 600 variables, computations, dialogues, scripts already built. It's documentation for almost all of it, examples of templates, memos about different issues you'll face in doing a family law project, how to handle issues about foreign languages, et cetera, et cetera. So if you're at all inclined to be working in the family law area and don't have a copy of this kit, you should request one and browse it for reusable material. The last topic I just want to touch on, I'm going to also check on questions. Steve Simon is raising a point. Other than, I'll read your thing, Steve, and then we can unmute you if you want to keep talking about it. But other than downloading a complete A2J file and edit it for a new interview, or copy it in an A2J and copy and paste, do you have any advice about how to copy and paste interviews in A2J 6? That's an interesting question. I'm going to put John Mayer on the spot if he happens to be listening and willing to see if he can answer that. What's the current state of, let's see, did we lose John? Yeah, I'm afraid he must have known I was going to call on him, so John appears to have disappeared. If anybody else knows, I think the short answer is...
I think Jessica's here. So let me unmute her. I think I saw her hand.
Jessica?
Here we go. Jessica,
hi everyone. Yeah, thanks.
Here we go.
So yeah, there's not an easy way to copy and paste from one to another. We're working on the ability to have Google Docs-esque sharing and copying, so you'd be able to like have two people work on it, but that involves us having to do some back-end server permissions and making sure one copy doesn't override the other. But in terms of interview, because it's web-based, copying and pasting can throw some craziness into, like if you copy from Word, it can bring characters in. Even if you copy from one interview into another, it can throw some crazy JavaScript characters in. So we don't have a perfect solution right now, but our team does have it in the issue queue, and we are working on the ability to copy chunks of questions, copy entire questions, copy logic, and have some sort of sharing environment. But so it's not necessarily, I don't have a good solution right now, but we are working on it.
So right now, Jessica, if you want to kind of reuse an existing AJ6 interview, you can download the entire thing, upload it into your personal AJ author account, right, as a fresh module, and then start editing it there to your heart's content.
Yes.
Yeah. But not piecemeal. There's no piecemeal copying at the moment.
Right.
Okay. Thanks, Steve, for raising that. All right. Let me touch on this topic here. I have on the screen a couple challenges. If you're trying to do some really sophisticated inclusion of subtemplates across a bunch of parent templates, so let's say you've got a collection of family law applications, and 2 or 3 different sets are all independent modules on LHI because they've got their own interview and their own sets of documents they assemble, but they all share some common piece or multiple pieces. Right now, if you want to edit that included piece, some disclaimer or some specialized caption form that changes, you have to change it in each module. Each module on LHI is kind of a self-contained universe of files. So it's a little bit of a limitation to be aware of, kind of a gotcha if you're not paying attention. If you're doing a broad collection of templates that have some underlying commonality, and that'll mean more to you if that's the kind of thing you're doing, and happy to talk about it if so. A somewhat related challenge is where you've got a lot of content maybe developed by different people over time, and somebody in one of the templates has done a really great job, say, of doing a fee waiver or a particular financial statement, and you want to say, wow, I'm starting a new project that has that in it. Can I just grab what they've done and incorporate it into my template set? And in principle, that the mechanics of doing that are quite straightforward, but the problem is very often the names of variables and the way things are structured are quite inconsistent between the source template and the destination template, or what I sometimes call exogenous templates. And so this is a challenge we've come up with. We've got techniques and suggestions about it that probably would be their own call, but I would just quickly show you kind of a before and after. So you can imagine you've got, this is before you've incorporated, you've got some source template which may be using its own component file or multiple component files. Remember, with HotDocs, every template has a component file. They can share them, but they don't always have to share them. And maybe they're part of another set. So this is the example, say you've got a divorce system that's got a fee waiver in it, or an elder abuse application that's got a fee waiver. And you really like the fee waiver, but you're working on a totally different set, maybe a conservatorship or a guardianship or something else, for which the fee waiver in the source template would be great. But you've got your own universe of component files and your own structure that's inserting or assembling pieces. How do you take that source template into the destination template and get to this state, which is one integrated template set that has the source material in it? And these are just these bullets here that you can read at your leisure later, are just the kind of things you need to take into account to plan to accomplish. You need to be sure that all the variables in the material you brought in are actually present in the new universe and are consistent with what you're intending to do in your new set, in your destination set, and that they behave both properly in the interview and in the assembled documents. And if you happen to copy in dialogues that relate to the material you were importing, you have to make sure those dialogues behave the way you would expect in the new environment, which may be slightly different than the old environment. So I realize this is hard to grasp if you're not dealing with this currently, but happy to talk more independently about this challenge. I see there's another comment. Steve is saying you can download an A to J4 file and copy and paste from that to another A to J4 and then convert it to A to J6. So a side note to what Jessica was saying, I think if something's already in A to J4, you can't save it backwards to A to J. Sorry, it's already in A to J6. You can't save it back to A to J4. So for stuff that's already in 6, it's not of much use. Chris is raising a question. This is a good process to use shared components in shared variables so that the client isn't typing their name for each document. Now, I'm not following you, Chris. So I'm going to unmute you. Maybe you can explain what you're asking. You're unmuted. In case you want to raise that question orally. Chris, if you can speak, we can hear you. We can't hear you. Maybe you're not in position to be audible. I'm going to continue with the main presentation, just a slide or two, and then we'll be done. We can come back to any questions. So this is my last slide, which is really just some sort of takeaways. We certainly encourage you, spend your precious time improving and innovating, not reinventing. So that means when you're doing a project, look around to see who's already done parts of it that you can grab and steal and copy and use it. And then in your own work, if you see the corners of it that look like, wait, I'm doing this here and I'm doing this here and over here, and or I'm doing the same thing slightly differently in a variety of contexts, use the tools we described to modularize and reuse the functionality. And this all means pay attention while you're working on a project to that kind of architectural planning. Think about how to modularize, how to structure your craftsmanship to achieve these kinds of goals. And as you learn how to do this and get better and better at it and create great content, make sure you yourself give back and pass it forward. Okay, so Chris was trying to talk, but it's not set up for it. So let me open the floor generally to anyone who has questions. Again, raise your hands or type into the question pane. Let us know, did this make sense? Are these things familiar? Do they look tricky or non-obvious? Has anyone got additions to add? Extra ideas for reusability?
Well, this is Claudia. I mean, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that, the developer list is a community forum and it's very supportive. So I think that if any of you come up with something that uses some of these techniques, you can always share it, because maybe somebody else is trying to do that. And if you say in the list what is it that you did and how you're applying some of these techniques, somebody who has a developer login can later on go look at it, or at least it will flag it to me and Miranda in case we know somebody else is thinking about using the software in this way. At least we'll know. The other thing is, if you're trying to do this and you are testing and it's not working, you can always post on the list, because somebody else may say, oh yeah, I did that and this is how I did it. And so, the list is a no shame list, in the sense that everybody that's in this community started new. So nobody came here being an expert or anything like that. And you can ask or you can share. If you work really hard on something and you're proud of it, share it, because you never know when somebody else is gonna be looking for the same technique or the same way of using it. So just take advantage of the developer forum And don't feel that, oh, I'm gonna look bad, because in the LHI community there's no bad question.
And Claudia, does the listserv presently have a searchable archive? I'm pretty sure it does, right? Is it on every post? A link to it? Does anybody know? I'm not hearing Claudia, hopefully.
No, I'm looking for it. It used to be that we had it on the web page itself, so that when people came to the resource page, people could find it from there, but I know that that went away. So I'm just checking it out right now.
Okay.
To see if we have the searchable link.
Yeah, because there have been lots of really useful posts over the years, and this listserv in various forms goes back at least 10 years. And the same thing is true of the HotDocs forum that we mentioned earlier in the call, the big commercial forum for HotDocs users. If you register for that, you can access it, its entire history. And I think there's close to 20,000 posts over time in that guy.
Yeah, I'm checking it out right now on my inbox, and I'm not seeing a panel to go back to what's been posted to the list.
Okay.
So that may be that we changed the list about in 2015, I believe. So it could be that we no longer have that capacity. But I can find out and see if we could bring it up going forward, if it's helpful to people.
Yeah, certainly would be highly desirable if we can.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to talk about the next community call, Claudia?
Yeah, I'm actually really excited about the next community call. We've just confirmed that we're actually gonna move it to October 30th, and the reason we're moving it is because we're gonna have an excellent topic that is probably relevant to all of you. We're going to have Will Hornsby, who used to be at the ABA, and then Richard Granat, who has been working in Rapid Docs and document assembly for many years. And the topic is going to be looking at regulatory efforts for document assembly platforms and providers. So it's a call to let everybody know of what's been happening on the regulatory world, both at the state level and then at the ABA level. And then Mark is gonna moderate, so it's gonna be an update on what has happened, covering what some states have done or are proposing to do, where they're focused in regulation of platforms or providers, and then open it up for discussion and talk about what's gonna be coming up in the near future and other resources in case all of you as template creators or the folks that contract with you can be aware of these efforts should you want to become involved in that when it goes back up for regulation, or also if you see similar things happening in your state. So that's going to be on the 30th at 2 p.m. So we're moving it 1 week back. So I'll be sending it to the list shortly. So I hope it's a topic that's of interest, and we just want to make sure people know about what's going on at that level.
That should be exciting. It's very, very controversial. As Claudia mentioned, we have a couple states like North Carolina and New York that are either have already imposed burdensome limits on these kinds of applications or are considering doing so. And all kinds of fun constitutional and policy dimensions that Richard and Will be great to hear from. Okay, on this call, any other questions or comments? Bart, you got anything else you want to throw in as far as words of advice, wisdom for people that are trying to reuse or modularize?
No.
Looking around the room. For more information about this, the burdensome regulations. Maybe when we post the notice of our October 30th call, Claudia, we can include some links to some of the past articles and discussions, including, I think, Richard Granite has done some really interesting blog posts. He takes a very strong position against some of these regulations, and we can recirculate those, I think, to really stimulate some interest.
Yeah, and I put the announcement on the chat box in case you want to sign up.
Okay. All right.
But yeah, maybe that's a good idea because there were a couple like FCC statements and other opinions. Maybe good to post those for those that want to kind of come up thinking about questions or be a little bit more well versed. And what I'm hoping is that some people will have a sense of reassurance that a lot of these disclaimers and stuff are already being done in the legal aid community, either in their interview or through LHI. So, hopefully we can have some discussion on that.
Okay. Sounds good. One last call for any comments on today's topics. Hopefully we got you thinking. If you're not already doing any or all of the things that we went through, try to build them into the next phase of work and save yourself some time, both presently and in the future. But I think, Claudia, we can wrap up, and we'll see you next time on October 30th in this same format.
Okay, thank you all. You're gonna get a survey asking for feedback on the call. If you have 5 minutes, let us know how you found this, if you found it helpful, etc. Thank you so much. Hopefully we'll see some of you in the October call. Take care.